To the breaking news in Lower Manhattan, where Sean Combs was sentenced to 4 years and 2 months in prison. With time served, it will be a shorter time.
We have team coverage on this story as well. We begin with Eyewitness News reporter Kemberly Richardson, who is outside of the court. Kemberly?
Yes, and people gathered out here now learning about this sentence. Sean Combs sentenced to 4 years, 2 months in prison. Of course, that will also include taking off the 13 months that he has already served in jail in Brooklyn. He will also be followed by 5 years of supervised release and have to pay a $500,000 fine. That is the maximum 5. This sentence is far less than what the prosecution wanted. That group wanted a sentence of at least 11 years behind bars. The defense wanted far less, 14 months. Again, he has already served 13 months. Sean Combs spoke this afternoon. It was the first time that we heard from him at length since this trial started, the 8-week trial started. He spoke for about 12 minutes. He told the judge that he had lost respect for myself. He had lost respect, that he had been humbled and broken to his core. He said that he hated himself right now, that he had been stripped down to nothing. He apologized to his children, telling his mother also, who's been here in the courtroom since the very beginning, that, quote, "You taught me better." He then asked the judge for mercy. He said he begged the honor for mercy. He said if he'd given him a second chance, I wouldn't let him down, that he took full responsibility for his crimes. Again, the judge not buying that, taking a sentence somewhere in between what the prosecution and the defense wanted. The woman at the center who opened this entire can of worms, Combs' former girlfriend, Cassie Ventura. Of course, she is the woman we saw in that video from the hotel in 2016 in Los Angeles. Prosecutors say she was trying to leave a so-called freak-off. Combs did not want that to happen, and he was beating and attacking her. This afternoon, just a few minutes ago, we had a statement from Cassie Ventura's attorney saying, quote, "While nothing can undo the trauma caused by Combs, the sentence imposed recognizes the impact of the serious offenses he committed." The judge today, during sentencing, at the end of the day, also commending the women, Ventura and a woman who testified by the name of Jane, another one of Combs' exes, for their bravery in coming forward and telling the truth. We are waiting here outside the courtroom. Usually at the end of the day, we see Combs' family, his children, his mother, and many supporters leave this courthouse. We will look for that and bring you any updates. Back to you guys in the studio.
Okay, Kimberly, thank you. Well, now we want to go to Darla Miles, who was in the courtroom as the sentencing was handed down. And Darla, what was his reaction?
This is probably the quietest verdict I've ever heard, Lauren. The courtroom was still. And I'm going to tell you why. This day has been such an emotional roller coaster. It's been so dense, with 5 of Combs' attorneys speaking, 2 civilians speaking, his children speaking. He addressed the court. And so by the time the verdict was reached and it was read, and you could kind of hear the direction it was going, Combs was literally just kind of seated back in his seat, and you could see that he was deflated and depleted after making that emotional statement. I want to tell you, it started earlier in the day. He started crying. He was actually sobbing earlier when his children spoke. His 3 girls cried the entire time. They begged the judge to please give me my father back. My father is a changed man. I've already missed one parent. I don't want my little sister to grow up without a parent. That's speaking of, Kim Porter, who passed away, and he has a young 2-year-old daughter, Love. So they were very emotional, saying, I don't want my little sister to go through what I went through. And so during that time, you can kind of see Combs going through a range of emotions. He wanted to jump up and protect them, and then he kind of felt deflated and fell back in his seat. After that, they showed that emotional video that we've been talking about, and it was almost like his life was flashing before his face, and he sat back in his chair. You could see he was trying to conceal it by holding his hand on his face like this, his face in his hand like that, but you could just see the tears streaming down his face. And at some point, you could see his body shaking when he was crying, just with his head in his hands. He was blowing his nose. His attorney, Brian Steele, was sitting next to him. You could see he was trying to console him. So after that, the court took a break, and then we get to the latter part of the day, and that's when Combs approached, stood up, and he made comments. He cracked, his voice cracked. That was really poignant when he got up and addressed the court. As Kimberly reported, he said, he turned to his children. His voice cracked when he said, "I have failed you as a father." And then he really got the most emotional when he turned to his mother. He held his head in his hand. He's just like, "Mom, I just failed you. I failed my mother." And so a lot of his emotions were expended during all of this day, this emotionally roller coaster of a day. And so when the verdict was read, and you could see that Judge Arun Subramanian was saying, this warrants a significant sentence, that you cannot wash away your bad deeds by good deeds, and that this is the requirement per the statute. He could see it going in that direction. And so he was stoic and quiet. And I'm going to tell you what was very interesting about this verdict. You can't react, right? The court officers always say, I don't care whether you agree or disagree with the verdict, everyone must be quiet. So that was expected, that there would be no one making any outbursts. But what was not expected was there was no facial expressions. His children, his mother, his attorneys, Combs, they had no facial expression, no reaction after being depleted, emotionally depleted, after really pretty much begging for his freedom, and then learning that he would be spending more than 4 years in prison.
Yeah, well, Darla, you certainly gave us a clear picture of what happened inside the courtroom. Again, Sean Diddy Combs was sentenced to 4 years and 2 months. Darla, talk a little bit more about just the family's reaction, even after the initial verdict. You were saying that their faces were blank, but was there a moment that that you could feel the emotion between Sean Combs and the family when he had to leave the courtroom? Can you give us a little bit more insight into those moments?
So absolutely, Sade. So, you know, we typically see Sean Combs at the end of any of these proceedings during the day. He will turn, he will give hard hands to his family. He says, "Mama, I love you." He addresses his daughter. He didn't have much to say. He really didn't address his family. He kind of nodded his head and went directly back with the court marshals and the court officers. So it was something that we've never seen. The fact that he just was spent. You know, he was spent. He was depleted. He was deflated. I wouldn't say despondent, but he basically spent the entire day. His attorney spent 4 hours fighting for his life. His children were so impactful. The girls, they started crying before they even started to address the court. And all 6 of his adult children spoke today. That was also very, very powerful. That was almost a powerful moment right before we broke for lunch today, where a lot of watchers in the court thought that might move the needle on the sentencing. But Judge Arun Subramanian said, we cannot take domestic violence lightly. We will not undervalue the victims who came forward in this case, that millions of victims of domestic violence would be inspired by the women who came forward in this case. He said, the very powerful thing he said as he closed, he says, "I hope you do more with your second chance." And he said this court is adjourned. But after an emotional day, Sean Combs leaving deflated, depleted, no emotion, stone-faced after learning his fate after this extensive 8-week trial.
Courtroom. Darla, thank you so much. I know you put a lot of time and work and effort into all of this. Just a tremendous description there. You almost get the impression that the family was dumbfounded by what they had. They had no visual interpretation, no visual reaction there. Almost like, I can't believe this is actually happening.
Finally, a chapter closes, I guess.
Channa, good to have you back with us. You saw the sentence, 50 months, so that's 4 years, 2 months, which comes under the pre-sentencing report. What do you make of that?
So really what we have to remember is that the pre-sentencing report added in a few aggravating factors that actually changed the guidelines. That's why they were on the higher end. They added in the fear and threat. These are items that came from the other charges that he was acquitted of. The judge was very clear. Even when he started, he said, I will not consider the acquitted charges and that information when I am sentencing. So if you take that out and you look at what his criminal history is along with the sentencing guidelines, that's where you get this sort of, he's on the higher end of that spectrum. So we always have to put it in context.
So prosecutors, they wanted 11+ years. The defense wanted 14 months. All in all, is this considered a win?
I think it's a win, and I'll
Combs'
tell you why. So when we look at the prosecution, they had all of these aggravating factors. They wanted to say that the victims were vulnerable individuals. They wanted to add in the threats and coercion, the obstruction of justice. Had they gotten those in and the judge agreed with them, he would have been looking at a higher sentencing guideline. So when we look at what he was sentenced with, it is on the higher end. However, the judge said he wanted to impose a sentence that was going to deter others. However, when we look at the time, you serve 85% of federal time. Okay, so when we're talking about 4 years, that's already going to bring it down to 3.5. He has a year in.
Yes.
So now we're talking about 2.5. So
But what about the
looking at
play
this-
when, you know, there's certain rules that you have to play by, and he was
Right.
caught with the,
Yes.
you know, the other
So let me tell
messages
you.
over the
Other
phone
aspects of
and-
the sentence.
Yes. Well, that's actually not going to come in sentencing. I'll tell you where that comes in. That's going to come in when he's up for parole. When we get to this time that he
Yes.
can be up for, the Bureau of Prisons is going to say you didn't play by our rules, you violated our rules, therefore you can be denied parole. And so that's where you're going to start to see that.
But the hope and expectation, I think, is this is what the judge was getting at,
Yes.
was don't do that.
Exactly.
That what we're looking for you is to show true accountability, to show true change, not just to the court, but to your children, the family, and all the other people who followed you throughout your career.
Exactly. They are looking for him to be a model citizen. If he wants to stay on the lower end and get any time for good behavior, he has to be a model citizen from this point on.
Let's talk about an appeal, because you know it's coming. What do you think are the chances of that
grounds.
happening? Because the judge was, you know, very clear. He wanted to make sure everything was buttoned up, that there
Yep.
weren't grounds for an appeal.
All the I's dotted, the T's crossed.
Absolutely. This judge is he's an amazing judge, and I'll tell you why. He builds a record. And what is a record? That's everything that happens at trial, that when it goes up on appeal, they are only looking at the record. So he has made a solid record because he knows that this is going up on appeal. However, I will tell you, I think the biggest grounds for appeal are going to be on his denial of the Rule 29 motion, which is where we know they say that these charges should not have they should have not been able to been brought, and that he shouldn't have been found guilty. And so I think that is going to give ripe grounds and fodder for the appeal.
And you alluded to this at 4 o'clock. There's a litany of civil cases that are underway now and perhaps more to come, correct?
Absolutely. I
Yeah.
expect to see more come out of this, because we have to remember, although the civil trial does not impact the criminal trial, criminal culpability can be brought into a civil trial. So I expect to see even more lawsuits filed.
Wow. So much today.
The legal drama's not over.
So much
No.
to unpack. We're going to delve certainly more into this.
Channa, thank you.